We now reach the conclusion of the series of portions which tell us and teach us about the instruction to build the tabernacle, to build the Mishkan in the desert. Initially, the instruction was from Hashem to Moshe, and then he conveyed that to the people, and we are told in this week's portion of how the tabernacle, once it was all completed, the bits and pieces, how it was erected. And there was a reckoning. Initially, there was a reckoning of all the materials that were brought, and then the Mishkan was put up, so to speak. We are told in the beginning of the portion that these are the reckonings of the tabernacle, and then it introduces us to a new term. Mishkan ha'edus, says the Torah. This was a tabernacle of testimony. Mishkan ha'edus, tabernacle of testimony. What does this mean, a tabernacle of testimony? Up until now, it's only ever been referred to as the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Tabernacle of testimony. One of the reasons given is that the completion of the Mishkan was when the Aron, the ark, was placed in there. In fact, we are told that you should place the ark in the Mishkan, ve'el ha'aron, in the ark, titenes eidos, and in the ark itself you should place what? The eidos, the testimonies. What were the testimonies? They were, of course, the tablets of stone, both the broken bits of the first tablets and the complete second set of tablets were placed in the Aron, in the ark, in the tabernacle. And only once that had been done, only once that had been placed, this Aron, this ark with the tablets inside, had been placed in the tabernacle, did it become a holy place, a place of sanctity, a place of testimony that this was the resting place of Hashem. Up until that point, it was just simply a structure whose purpose was to house the Aron, the ark, in the Holy of Holies. And therefore now it's called Mishkan ha'edus, the tabernacle of testimony, i.e. the place where the Eidos, the testimony of Hashem, is placed. We then are told that Vateichel kol avodas, all of the work was completed, the work that Hashem had commanded Moshe to command the Jewish people to do had been completed, and then we are told Vaya'asu, and they did K'chol asher tzivah Hashem as Moshe, according to everything in which Moshe was commanded by Hashem. Now this is a little surprising. Surely they would not have dared do anything different. Why did it need to tell us that they actually did everything according to what Hashem had commanded Moshe? Of course they would have done. They would never have done anything else. But the reason for this is because there is a principle that we're quite familiar with, of ha'osek b'mitzvah patur min ha'mitzvah. If we are engaged in a mitzvah, we are exempt from another mitzvah. Now there are a number of examples of this, and there are certain qualifications, but it's a general principle. If something needs to be done now, a mitzvah needs to be done now, and it cannot be delayed to later. One of the classic examples of it is when somebody passes away, then those involved in burying the person are osek b'mitzvah, are engaged in a mitzvah. They are exempt, in theory, from any other mitzvah if they first have to complete this work of dealing with the person being buried, and they cannot put it off till later. So we have a general principle of if you're engaged in one mitzvah which cannot be delayed, in other words, if you were to delay it, you would miss the time, then you are exempt from another mitzvah. And this is what happened with the Mishkan. The people were now involved in the instruction of building the Mishkan, which was a commandment from Hashem. There were certain mitzvahs, certain other commandments, which had to be set aside during this time. And therefore, once it had been completed, the building of all the items for the tabernacle had been completed, then Vaya'asu, they did K'chol asher tzivah Hashem as Moshe, according to everything Hashem had commanded Moshe, i.e. the entire Torah. They were able to then go on to all the other mitzvahs, which they had to suspend for the moment, they had to put on hold, because they were engaged in building the tabernacle at this moment in time. Once it was completed, all the items, the bits and pieces were completed, then it was erected. Who erected it? The Torah tells us, Vayokem Moshe es HaMishkan. Moshe erected the Mishkan. And then it tells us, after it tells us he erected the Mishkan, which is the general principle, the general term for the entire construction, we are told, Vayitein es Adonov, and he put down its sockets, Vayosem es Keroshov, he set up its boards, Vayitein es Berichov, he inserted its bars, and Vayokam es Amudov, and he erected its pillars. So it first tells us he built the Mishkan, and then it tells us all the bits and pieces. That's a little obvious. if he erected the Mishkan in total, then of course he would have put up the boards and put down the sockets and so on and so forth. The explanation given is very interesting. The order in which Moshe put this up was that first he did the coverings. Over the Mishkan there were a number of coverings on the Mishkan. A number of curtains which were used to cover it. And that completed the Mishkan. And we are told, the Medrash tells us, that first what happened, Moshe in fact erected the first covering before he put the pillars and the sockets. And what happened was it was miraculously suspended up in the air. And only then, once the first covering was miraculously suspended, because there were a number of coverings which I've spoken about in a previous video, but the bottom covering, once that was suspended, only then did he put the sockets and the pillars and everything else that was needed for the construction of the Mishkan. Why did he do it in that way? Why did he do it in that order? Surely it would have been a lot easier to first put the sockets and then the pillars and then the bars and everything that was needed, and only then would he put the curtains, the covering on top. Well, the reason for this is that there is a medrash that says that the building of the Mishkan was there and it mirrored creation. There's a lot of things that happen in the Mishkan, certain things which mirror creation, God creating the world. And this is one example of this. There is an opinion that heaven was created before earth. Heaven was created before earth. There's an opinion in the Talmud that says that the heaven was created before the earth. And therefore what Moshe was doing here was he was following Hashem. If Hashem created heaven before earth, he too was creating the covering, he was putting up the covering which was miraculously suspended, and only then, which represented the heaven, and only then did he build the pillars and the sockets and everything, the bars, everything that was needed, which represented the earth. What's very interesting is that if you look in the portion of Terumah, which is where Hashem instructs Moshe about this, the instruction to build and to create the coverings come before the instruction to build the pillars and the sockets. This almost indicates that the instruction is that first not only should you build it, but first you should erect the covering which mirrored the creation of heaven, and only then should you build the sockets and the pillars which represented earth. And that is why it says, Vayakem et HaMishkan, he built the Mishkan, which was the covering, which effectively is already a Mishkan, because there was a tent, a tabernacle. And only then did he build everything underneath, as Barichov, as Adonov, the sockets, and the bars. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy the newer version. Please, of course, send through any feedback that you may have in which you may feel we can improve. And don't forget, most of all, do send it along to your friends, send them the link, and spread the word. Thank you.